You have a special job to do in the world, my friend, and I'm excited to introduce to you today to one of my friends whose special job is amplifying the message of other people. The host of Letters from Home podcast, you're going to have a treat in listening to Meg's story as we get started today.
Hi, it's Hornor. Thanks for tuning in today to the For Success podcast, an inspirational program about overcoming the I'm too small mindset, redefining success, and growing your lifestyle business legacy without fear. And now, here's your host, my beautiful wife and Christian business mentor, Katie Hornor.
Meg, I'm so excited to have you here on the podcast today. We're different states, different countries, but it's so cool to have you sort of in my space this morning and on the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I love chatting with you.
Meg and I met at the Spark Christian Podcast Conference in 2020, which feels like it was a couple months ago now, but it feels like a couple years ago with all that's happened. And we just hit it off and became really good friends. And Meg is the host of the Letters from Home podcast, which essentially amplifies the messages of other people. And I love that. And I'm so excited to hear your story today with like how that got started. And because you haven't always been in like broadcasting or anything like that, right? So give us some backstory, Meg. Let us hear how you started your podcast.
For sure. Well, I'm a mother of 8. We have we have 2 left at home, but we've got 2 bonus from quarantine. So we have 4, 4 at home. And I've been a stay-at-home mom for 30 years, done a little bit of work here and there with nannying and that sort of a thing. So like you were saying, podcasting is something where I've really kind of stepped out in, I guess you could say, a second act, second 53, and just stepping out with this beautiful ministry that God has used. It started off small and it's really growing, and it's been a real exciting adventure. I'm looking forward to sharing that with your listeners.
Did you listen to podcasts before, or like what was it that sort of caught your attention and got you started thinking about it? Because I know I've got people listening who have been thinking about starting a podcast. So how did all of that play out for you?
It's after Anthony Bourdain passed away, and I was looking for information on him, and I stumbled upon something called a podcast. I listened to it, and it was so informative. And while I was cooking and cleaning, I was listening to his story, and I was so moved, and it made my work go by so quick. And then I started thinking, well, there's got to be a lot of Christian I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, and I thought it'd be great to listen to some Christian podcasts while I'm cooking and cleaning. And so I started Googling and looking in search bars, and I really had a hard time finding something that would encourage me. It was this plus this and this plus this. And I thought, what really encourages me is hearing stories, hearing faith stories, hearing people's lives and the things that they've overcome. As I look at your backdrop and it says your message matters, I think of your story matters. And so I got your story, Katie, late night after a short night of getting your story at the Spark conference on my podcast, because stories matter, life stories. And when I hear somebody's story of how they've overcome and how they gave their life to the Lord and what they've overcome and what God's doing in their lives, it makes me want to love God more. It makes me want to love my community more. And so when I had that idea, as I was in my kitchen thinking, maybe I should start a podcast, I have 30 faces come into my mind of people, when I think of their lives, they inspire me. And so I started with that. I started with those faces. I'm still working away at those 30 faces on my podcast. And one of them was this lady who's 89 years old, and she lived in Gabon for 40 years, and she helped translate, as a single woman, helped a translation of a Bible in a unique language come to pass. Another one is a friend of mine whose 11-year-old daughter has a cupcake business, and she started the business to help feed the homeless because she was with her family, middle class family downtown eating at a restaurant and saw a homeless person, wanted to give him her cupcake. And so I just thought these stories need to be told, and maybe I'm the vehicle. And as I look at myself as a vehicle, I'm pretty decently technology for a woman my age. So many women my age don't even know what a podcast is or how to use it. But that week I Googled how to start a podcast. So if I could do it, anybody could do it.
That's awesome. And I love that you just took action and said, if they can do it, I can do it. And I'm going to find out how. I love that. I love working with people like that. And something you said there about being the channel of God's blessing reminded me in our Doing Business with God class. One of the texts that we use is this book called Bible-Based Business by Jeff Testerman. And he has a quote on page 59 that says, we need to pursue the blessing and favor of God in our lives so that we can become a conduit or a channel of God's blessing to the world around us. And I love the way that you and the people that you interview on your show have taken that personally. I've got God's blessing. Now let me share that blessing with other people. And through the power of spoken word, right? That's what a podcast is. We're able to be that channel that passes that on, whether it's an encouraging story or an inspirational story or a lesson or a business information, whatever that is. The Lord is using each of us in our own unique ways to be able to be a channel of blessing to other people, and I really, really, really love that. What do you think was the hardest thing in starting a podcast? I know you said you immediately had an idea of people you wanted to talk to. What were some of the other challenges that you faced or that other people could expect to face perhaps if they start a podcast?
I guess it depends on your strengths. I think I'm pretty organized, so that part has come easy.
Wait, you have to be organized to podcast?
Well, you don't, but it helps. You got to cater to your strengths, right? And for me, I'm organized. I have a heart for people, and I love to encourage. So those things. But what I'm not as good at was figuring out some of the technology. For me personally, was a challenge, and figuring out how to upload it and how to register and how to do this and that. But for me, the key was knowing that God wanted me to do it. I was able to kind of push through all of those things. I think another challenging thing is figuring out the best way to interview, how to prepare your guests, how to do the interview, how to see how they're feeling about getting their story out. What do they not want to share? The focus of each episode, figuring out your why. What is the point? Figuring out the music you want to use that fits with your whole reason for doing it. And some of that was challenging just because it takes time. And that's where my kids were really helpful. So, hey, any of you business people out there who are thinking, well, I don't know about that. Well, hey, don't you have like a niece or a nephew or a spouse who's maybe better? Or they could help you with one piece that you might not have. Or there's a lot of great groups of podcast communities and how to start a podcast. There's so many resources of people who just want to welcome you with open arms and help you. I'm in a Christian Podcasters Association. There's people there who haven't started, who have an idea, and we just kind of lovingly come around one another and help each other, right, Katie, with questions that we have, or I don't know what microphone to use, or I don't know what headset, or that sort of thing. But I pretty much just Googled how to start a podcast, and my son helped me get signed up with Anchor. I Googled which microphone to use. I got a Yeti mic and one simple headset, and I started the podcast. And I didn't upgrade any equipment till 20 episodes later, roughly. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with very little if you have your focus and your why all squared away. And my tagline is everyday extraordinary faith stories. And I based it off of 2 Corinthians 3:3, for you show that you are a letter from Christ delivered by us. And so there's, a story in each person that is like a letter. For me, thus, it's called Letters from Home. And in my artwork, there's a picture of a bird bringing a letter down from the sky, because for me, the letters from home is a letter from heaven, a little blessing of a testimony from heaven's doorstep to yours. So I think figuring out your why, it guides everything. So that's, I think, probably the most important thing about getting started is knowing God wants it and what your focus is going to be.
And I love that you mentioned the Christian Podcasters Association, because I wanted to bring that up. You guys, if you want to start podcasting, if you are a podcaster already, that group is an amazing treasure trove of resources. The help and the support and the answers to questions, like Meg said, Christian Podcasters Association, you can find them on Instagram and Facebook. You need to join that group and become a part of that community if you're podcasting or thinking about podcasting in the near future. Another resource, Meg says she is hosting on Anchor. I'm hosting on Buzzsprout. So when you think about the hosting, don't get overwhelmed by that if that's all new. Basically, that's just a place for your audio files to reside so that people can find them online. All right. And there's all different kinds of places that do it pretty inexpensively. It's a monthly fee for them to host those, but that gives you like a link that people can then click on to go find that audio file on the internet and listen to it. Or then it also feeds into the different podcast apps on the different devices. So it's not as complicated as it sounds. I just didn't want anyone thinking that there. And the mics, you mentioned the Yeti mic. I'm using an Audio Technica now, which I didn't upgrade to until after episode 100, right? I just did it on my iPhone. I just
Absolutely.
used the message app or the voice recording app on my iPhone and got that audio file that then I just edited on my computer with a free editing thing, right? So it is a learning curve to start something like this, just like anything new, but it doesn't have to be expensive and it doesn't have to be overwhelming. And there's some really simple tools that you can use and things. And my friend Pat Flynn has an intro to podcasting course too. And I'm an affiliate for that. I'll be happy to put a link in the show notes for that course. If you want somebody to hold your hand and help you do it faster and easier so you don't have to Google it and put all the pieces together yourself, that's a really good course to take because he lays it all out for you step by step to help you get started. But Meg, let's talk about now a little bit of the opportunities or the surprises that came from having a podcast. I mean, you went from having essentially no online platform to suddenly having this platform and this voice in the world. What were some of the opportunities or the surprises that you found along the way of growing this?
I first started off thinking, if this blesses one person, I will consider it a success. It would be worth it. And I started off with a mindset of, I just want to bless maybe people from church or Christians that I know with some testimonies. But what I found is that many of my other family members, just all kinds of people, started listening to the podcast. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll give it a chance to have a wider audience, a broader audience. So I started looking, I heard Instagram was a good thing. So I looked into Instagram. And so I developed an Instagram presence and a Facebook page, just kind of one little step at a time, guys. So like Katie was saying earlier, it's just one step at a time, and it's doable. And so I started with Instagram, and I wanted to give it a chance to maybe people that I don't know. And I have a big community on Instagram. I have met so many people. I have gotten to speak and be on probably 15 podcasts. I've had so many people email me and write me notes about how encouraged they were and how they were weeping and encouraged hearing the stories. So those are some of the opportunities. I've got to have conversations with some nieces and nephews and all different kinds of people. And I've got to partner with other ministries and businesses to support one another. I've done a live during quarantine with a couple of ladies that I met on Instagram. We got to do a live talking about how can we help people whose kids are struggling with anxiety during quarantine. So there's been so many opportunities for me personally also I've gotten to stretch myself. I've gotten to try new things. I was nervous about speaking before, and I've gotten more comfortable with that. I've pushed through some of those fears and some of those I can'ts, knowing that God has called me to do that. I just have stepped through. So just for me personally, I've grown as a person just getting to do that. I got featured as top 50 mom in podcasting in Podcast Magazine.
That's awesome.
I mean, how crazy is that? And shortly after, some lady who's a book author, she asked if I wanted to be in a conversation. So I'm in this article with 10 other top 50 moms in podcasting. I've been featured in articles. I've exposed. I just started. I thought I better try and figure out LinkedIn and Twitter. So again, it's a journey, just like business, right? You do one step at a time to how to increase, how to improve, how to better get your message and your stories and your word out there. And so that's what I've been doing, just one step at a time. And probably the best part is I've met so many amazing people along the way, Katie, like you, where I feel connected, and I feel like my podcast has this large group of people surrounding me, supporting me.
I love that. I love the community aspect, because community is something that's very, very important to me. It's interesting that you talk about, the growing the community and the opportunities for ministry in regards to this, because a lot of people think of a podcast as like another sales channel or something like that, especially if they're not familiar with podcasts. And a lot of businesses want to think, well, how is this going to benefit my business? I had this conversation with somebody in a coaching group the other day in terms of what's your goal? And you mentioned this earlier too. What's your goal for the podcast? There is no right or wrong answer, right? But when we're in business, we tend to ask, how is this going to benefit my business? Right. And in my case, I had to look at my podcast, not as a way to make money, not as a way to necessarily grow my audience and gain all kinds of new people. I look at it more as a way of speaking into my people, as a way of mentoring my people, right? This becomes, because podcasting is very personal. It's like you're in my ears, right? It's like you're whispering to me and sharing these. It's almost like a one-to-one conversation. It's a very personal experience when you're hearing this. And for me, it had to look at it as a way of like, this is another way that I can invest in my people, that I can mentor my people and create that relationship and that community that then is going to benefit the business, though maybe not in a directly monetary way. What do you think about that? Like, what would you say to other people who maybe have a small business or a blog and are thinking about starting a podcast and wondering, which way do I go with this?
One of the other blessings of podcasting is just seeing what other people are sharing. I feel like I've been exposed to so many great ministries and businesses and people, which also encourages your own inspiration and gives you ideas. So I've found a bunch of storytelling podcasts. There's all different kinds of podcasts. I'm sure there's all different kinds of business podcasts as well. And when you're out there kind of testing things out, you're supporting other people in their business by listening to their podcast, by sending them a note, by giving them a shout out on Instagram or Facebook. You're enriching them, but you also get enriched because you are listening to not only knowing them, but hearing their message, hearing what they are doing. It goes back to your why. What would be the purpose of your podcast? Mine is to encourage. And so I don't want a cost associated with that, because I want people's stories and the message to be that. But there's other things you can do. Like one thing I did 2 months ago was I started a Patreon account. So if people are enjoying the ministry and they see a button on my website or they see a little note at the bottom of my episode, they can click on that and support in that way. But maybe you want World Concern to be, wouldn't that be cool to have World partner with World Concern or something and have them, pay you some, and then you're supporting them. So there's a lot of opportunities for that. And there's a lot of people out there who are doing that. If you find a podcast community like let's see, Thomas Umstattd Jr. He's got a lot of information about how you can monetize. There's so many great episodes out there you can listen to about monetizing. But again, I think it really comes back to your why and what would be the point of it. Are you trying to support other people in your own business? Are you trying to really get your product and message out there? It depends on the whole purpose.
Talk to us about your definition of success. This is the For Your Success podcast. And I love the fact that there is no one definition. What does success mean to Meg Glesener?
What success means to me, it goes back to my life and my personal thing is that I want to honor my Lord with every fiber of my being. I want to love my neighbor as myself. And my why for the podcast is just to get out these everyday extraordinary faith stories. So if I feel that I'm honoring God with what I'm doing, it's a success. And some of the other things is I really want my kids to be proud of me, and they all are. Before I shared my story on another podcast, I said, I want your approval because I got some yucky parts in my story, and each one of them called me and said, Mom, I'm proud of you. Get your message out there. That's great. Each one of my kids listens to the podcast. So that's just on a personal level. On a bigger level, it is so important to me. One of the most important things to me about getting people's story out, and Katie, I think you can attest to this, I want the person who I'm interviewing to be really proud of what we've put together. I want their kids and their family to be proud of that. That is something that guides my interview process. So when I see that the people that I'm interviewing are grateful and they're happy and their people in their world are blessed, and not only that, the stories are blessing people that they don't even know. I have one episode that's reached 700, and that's kind of cool to think that story could be going out. I only know so many of those people, but God is using to bless many. So for me, that's a bonus to think that I stepped out in faith, and it started with just encouraging a few people, and now it's going out. So yeah, I just want to encourage anyone out there, if you start small in success is doing what God wants you to do. And if God wants you to do this, he is going to give you the grace and the wherewithal and the technology. And hey, I'm available to help you too. I'm a moderator in the association over there, and Katie, and there's lots of people who are willing to help you along the journey. It's a great ministry to link arms in.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for your encouragement and for sharing your story with us. You guys, if you're watching this, if you're listening, I want you to subscribe to my channel, of course, but I also want you to go over to lettersfromhomepodcast.com and subscribe to Meg's podcast. You're going to want to go back and listen to all of her episodes. You'll find mine in there amongst them. And that was a long episode too. We really went deep into my story and a lot of what God has done in our life to bring us to this point. And so I invite you over there to hear those letters and be encouraged. And we would love to hear from you. Leave us a review. Let us know that this was a blessing to you. Share it with a friend. And we look forward to seeing your podcast coming up soon in this whole audio space. So thank you, Meg, for being with us. And again, guys, follow her, lettersfromhomepodcast.com.
Thanks. Bye.
I want to honor you for taking time to invest in yourself and your business by listening in today. The For Your Success podcast is brought to you by Katie Hornor of handprintlegacy.com. Wherever you're listening, please leave us a comment or review. For show notes and links to the resources mentioned in today's episode, visit www.foryoursuccesspodcast.com. And remember, your message matters.